When I say sports, and specifically men's sports, but really all sports, are in a state of crisis right now, you might think, wow, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Because clearly sports are expanding. By all the metrics that we have of what success means, the global sports industry is getting absolutely massive. This is a write-up on Deloitte.com. Very cool, very nice people at Deloitte. Just basically speaking about the evolving global sports industry, they write about how the value of media rights continues to climb worldwide. This is a huge running theme in that different networks and streaming services are always vying for the rights to air or stream live sports, because live sports are one of the few things that people are watching live right now. Otherwise, a lot of stuff is either pirated or is watched on different networks. It's very hard to concentrate audiences into one space, especially at the same time. Sports are able to do that. That also includes huge growth in women's sports, growing at double-digit rates. Also, there's a lot of different stadiums and sports districts under development. And you can also see that just the way that sports have taken place, you can also see that sports in its development has become so much more digitized, so much more scientized, advanced to all these new heights. And yet, right? And yet, at the same time, if you are a sports fan right now, are you enjoying sports now more than ever? And if so, is it to do with what is making the sport more profitable? Or is it because of some pet thing that you follow that you're enjoying, or specific aspects of the sport? And I ask this because sometimes things are very successful from the capitalist standpoint, but that very success is contradictory to the soul of something. Does that make sense? And I don't want to sound super pretentious. I also think that perhaps this will reflect in the years to come in terms of how people engage with men's sports, because things are kind of coming to a head in terms of how much money can go into this and how much people are going to be able to afford to keep dumping money into this, especially the average consumer. But sports has evolved into this massive space. So why am I talking about the potential downfall of men's sports? What could I possibly mean in terms of men's sports crises? Today, we're going to address that in numerous directions. And unsurprisingly for me, it has to do with social things, okay? It has to do with the fact of, what are you engaging with? Are you enjoying it, and why? And I really do think that if you ask the average sports fan or the average person what they think about sports right now, despite the fact that this thing is growing at this rapid rate, they're going to have a negative thing to say. They're going to feel negatively about it. And that's important. A lot of this has to do with what you relate to, right? Sports are not value neutral things. We begin our discussion with an overview of something you've probably already heard about, which is U.S. men's hockey, okay? The Olympics, the Winter Olympics happened recently, and there was a massive controversy over the U.S. men's hockey team and their fraternizing with the fascist president of the United States. Here's a clip of one of the key members of the women's hockey team talking about it.
I just thought the joke was distasteful and unfortunate.
We're giving the State of the Union speech on Tuesday night. I could send a military plane or something, but if you would like to,
I hate when dudes do that shit. Listen, let me not get too distracted, but it's just being amazed that the president's gonna fly out a military plane, like buying into this flexing that they're doing is just so, is it low vibrational?
would like to, it's the coolest night. We have to, I must tell you, we're gonna have to bring the women's team. You do know that.
Absolutely. Just laughing, just cackling, hyenas cackling. I don't even understand. Maybe there's something different with my brain and how it's wired, but like I wouldn't have laughed even at first, even if I was in on the joke, right? I just would have been like, is there some sort of concern about like the safety protocols? Like I don't know what would have been the joke there, but they all got it immediately and started laughing.
The way women are represented, it's a great teaching point to really shine light on how women should be championed for their amazing feats. And now I have to sort of sit, and anybody has to sit in front of you and explain someone else's behavior. It's not my responsibility.
So yeah, if you didn't know, the U.S. men's and women's hockey teams won gold at the Olympics. For the U.S. men's team, this is a huge deal. It's the first time that they've won gold since the 80s. For the women's team, kind of expected. They have frequently placed in the medals and often win gold at the Olympics year after year. And there's a whole bunch of discourse you can get into about why that is. But one would not be, dismayed to see the U.S. men's hockey team enjoying this, and the protocols that they would enjoy this new surge of popularity after something like this happened. It was such a big deal. So now these star athletes are going to become star athletes, so to speak. But what had happened was that because of this call interaction with Trump, because of this men's hockey team's super excitedness to show up at the White House for the State of the Union address, people turned on them very quickly. Very, very quickly. That's not to say absolutely everybody did. Of course, if you're a hockey fan or if you're a Trump supporter, I'm not sure what would happen that would make you not support the things you want to support. But for the vast majority of people who don't approve of this highly unlikable, highly disapproved of president, and who also just have genuine concerns for the state of the world right now, seeing this was a hearty reminder of how athletes will be athletes and dumb jocks will be dumb jocks. And in a period of time wherein people are dying and people can't afford their groceries and our country is bombing school children in the Middle East, being super stoked to be flown out in a military plane to the State of the Union address, it takes a certain level of complete disconnection from the world around you. But that's not surprising, is it? Especially in the case of men's sports, male athletes are primed to be disconnected from the world around them. That's actually their training. They're actually punished for trying to engage with social issues in this day and age, which is something that represents a pretty big difference between men's and women's sports. I mean, take a look at this quote from Jack Hughes, who was, made this poster boy for the U.S. men's hockey team. He is a very talented young hockey player who was kind of a leader of the team. I don't know the details because I don't follow hockey very well. It's not my sport. I follow other sports. But, in the wake of what had happened, he's making this statement about how outraged he is at the outrage. Everyone's giving us backlash for the social media stuff today. It's so negative. People are so negative out there. They're trying to find a reason to put someone down and make something out of nothing. I mean, just think about that. Think about how disconnected you have to be to not only not understand why that joke would have been so disrespectful to the women's team in the first place, who were only being disparaged because they have made public comments about Trump, most of the players, but to sit there and be like, oh, people are just making something out of nothing. Oh gosh, like you could very much argue that winning a medal in a sport at the Olympics is more making something out of nothing than being concerned about the actions of the sitting president of the United States. Regardless, this is the world that these athletes live in. And it definitely came around to bite them, not just because people were mad. Of course, people get mad about things all the time. You can ignore them to whatever degree you want. But because they found out very quickly that associating with Trump is not exactly the best look, but more so, it doesn't really give you anything that you want. And as a matter of fact, it's really ugly and gross, right? It's really not a good vibe. So this is what they were treated to at the White House. McDonald's, right? They all had McDonald's at the White House. Everybody knows. I mean, apparently some people don't know that Donald Trump just eats fast food all the time. This is what they eat at the White House. Look at it. They get the ketchup packets. This is just a disaster, right? I mean, I'm sure they enjoyed the meal because why would they not enjoy the meal? It's not exactly like these folks give you the sense that they have the highest of taste. But it's also just like, this is what you sold your image out for. This is what you were so excited to accept. Just having a McDonald's meal with one of the most unpopular presidents of all time. Another reflection of this is that the team themselves then got disrespected. So Brady Tkachuk is a key member of the team, won the gold medal in Milan, right? And on Tuesday, as this Slate article points out, he was grinning and gripping in the Oval Office, feted by Donald Trump along with most of his teammates, getting glazed. Trump gave them a grand entrance in the middle of the State of the Union address, holding them up as an emblem of American victory. Trump administration, hook, line, and sinker, used these folks as a beautiful piece of propaganda for their administration. They got a standing ovation. And then Thursday, Tkachuk was finishing up a morning skate in Ontario, where he is the captain of the Canada's most boring NHL franchise, the Ottawa Senators. And then he had to answer questions about this. One was about why the American team laughed heartily when Trump belittled the gold medal winning U.S. women's hockey team. But the second question was, how did Brady Tkachuk feel about the White House posting an AI-generated video on its TikTok account that purported to show Tkachuk antagonizing the country where he works? The White House keeps posting these AI-generated videos, and then they post this one of Brady Tkachuk.
Had to come out and teach those maple syrup eating f***s a lesson. Canada, we own you, lil bro.
They posted that shit. And now Brady Tkachuk has to answer for that as he's playing for a Canadian team, the Ottawa Senators. So what does he say? He was decidedly having a less fun time now. He said, "It's clearly fake because it's not my voice, not my lips moving. I'm not in control of any of those accounts. I know that those words would never come out of my mouth, so I can't do anything about it." Oh, I forgot to put the chat on screen. Boom, there you are. So in addition to the generative AI being put out that's terrible of your likeness, saying something you definitely wouldn't say that definitely would put you in a bad light, now you got to answer for that. In addition to all the other bad press you're getting. Fuck around and find out, right? This is what happens when you want to be uncritical. This is what happens when you want to lap up this old world shit that doesn't work anymore. This is what happens when you don't think critically. It's a classic fuck around and find out story that a lot of people are enjoying right now. But what I'm really interested in is how it's a reflection also of a changing culture. A culture that is a lot more critical of the institutions that used to prop these kinds of things up, that used to successfully prop these kinds of people up. Because if you were also paying attention last weekend, the U.S. men's hockey team also featured on SNL. Rick Strom has this TikTok here where he talks about the different reception that the men's players got versus the women's players.
Big differences here.
No way, man. I hear your...
That was how Jack and Quinn Hughes were received at SNL. Now here's what happened next.
Oh, I hope some hockey players watched it.
We saw your show.
Now, in addition to Jack and Quinn Hughes being there, standing with their tail between their legs after this embarrassing week of PR, this is not a representative sample size of every single person that engages with sports. But it is kind of a telltale sign of, whether it's in liberal spaces or progressive spaces or whatever, a telltale sign of how much people have shifted in terms of what kinds of politeness they're able to offer or willing to offer to male athletes, and how much their opinion is more and more swayed towards people that they feel represent their interests in addition to just being good at a sport. And I don't think that this means nothing. A lot of these sports institutions want you to think it means nothing. They in fact want you to think that this kind of thing is beneath you and that it's beneath the athletes. But in actuality, who pays the tickets? In actuality, who's the one that props up these institutions? Who is the one that is supposed to be engaging with these institutions, this media, this mass media, and who are the ones who are supposed to be influenced by that mass media? It's supposed to be us, right? And I think that that's not nothing, right? Or it's not nothing that, I don't know how much out of context this is, but like this is a clip of Jack Hughes coming out of the NBC building and people being decidedly not that enthusiastic to see him. Whatever. It's funny, but I think it's a reflection of larger trends. First and foremost, all these sports institutions are being cucked, so to speak, by global fascism and by the Trump administration in particular. So Kareem Zidane has a really good blog called Sports Politico where he talks about intersections of politics and sports. And he writes about the ways that major sports institutions are essentially just bowing to this political pressure and not even allowing for a type of diversity of voices in the face of it. In particular, FIFA, which is known as one of the most corrupt organizations in the world, gave Donald Trump a special improvised FIFA Peace Prize. Right? Justifying the honor as recognition of Trump's unwavering commitment to advancing peace and unity throughout the world. And this is not just like some dumb jocks in the NHL or in the NFL. This is the biggest sports institution in the world, of the biggest sport in the world, which is football, which is soccer. And I think you would have to be pretty naive to think that it's completely unrelated from how much, for instance, sports gambling has become a huge pillar of money for live sports. This is an article in Prospect by Gabrielle Gurley about the damage from app-based gambling for the next generation of bettors. This is having a huge negative impact on the viewing experience, okay? You are seeing constant commercials all the time, every time you watch sports live. Constant commercials about how you can bet on some sports right now if you go to DraftKings or you go to FanDuel. Just download the app right now and they'll give you $100 for XYZ. And, this is actually covered quite well by Drew Gooden I know a lot of you enjoyed Drew Gooden's videos in a recent video that he made, actually a year ago, so not that recent, but there you go.
It's a fun game you can play on your phone. Kevin Hart, Post Malone, Chris Rock, LeBron James, Kevin Hart, Peyton Manning, Jamie Foxx, Eric Andre, Patton Oswalt, Vanessa Hudgens, the guy from that Kendrick Lamar song, Kevin Hart. Even the Talk Tua podcast is sponsored by Better. Why is it always the people you trust the most?
You don't need to know everything about every sport.
Good, because I don't.
Yeah, me either. All you need is a feeling and a phone.
Oh my gosh, I want.
That is such a bold way to advertise your product. You don't have to know anything about sports in order to bet on them. In fact, we would prefer you didn't. Look, this guy's just chilling in a hot tub. He doesn't even know what sport he bet on, and he won money. So go ahead, just open the app and start mashing buttons. I don't know, like, where do you think they got all the money to shell out to these celebrities? Could it be that maybe Prize Picks isn't the secret gateway to riches beyond my wildest imaginations, and maybe they're just trying to get my debit card number so they can take all my disposable income? Whether or not
This is something that has always existed in culture, right? Sports gambling. But like the fact that it's become so institutionalized and that is one of the biggest sort of sources for like capital injections right now kind of tells you something. It kind of tells you that the money has gone bananas. The money is out of control. The financialization, the amount of investment into things strictly based off of a profit motive, not even based off of some sort of sustainable partnership with a brand. These things are taking precedence at a higher and higher level. And it's getting so outrageous to the point that you are seeing that prediction marketing apps like Kalshi and what's the other one? There's a great article by Aisha Siddiqui about this. Kalshi and Polymarket. Kalshi and Polymarket are these new websites or apps that you can go on and you can bet on basically anything. You can bet on, usually it's sports stuff that gets the most, frequency of bets, but also presidential elections. How many times Elon Musk will say a certain word in a speech. Things like that. This thing is getting so tied up into sports themselves that you're seeing that athletes like Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Milwaukee Bucks, an NBA star, one of the best players in the NBA, has a new partnership with one of these apps. Massive conflict of interest. Giannis draws flack for joining Kalshi after $23 million was wagered on his next team. Obviously, this has major implications for the integrity of these sports because you literally have players that are tied up with these companies, and then these companies are making huge amounts of money betting on what those players are going to do, what team they're going to, how they will perform in a certain game, whether or not they'll make the playoffs. And we're already seeing different crises happening in the NBA and across sports of specific players getting banned for life because, come to think of it, it turns out that players might actually get involved with the betting. There was a pitcher, a Dominican pitcher in baseball, who has just been banned for life because he was betting that he would throw a ball to start at bats. So he would basically throw away a pitch, and he would tell his friends to bet that he was going to throw away the pitch, and then he would do it, and then they would make money. Like, that's the way that that's working. And the viewer experience of this is significant. It's not just a joke, right? It's not just something to be overlooked. This is significant. People are feeling the effects of this. And that's not just going to be reflected in the immediate numbers. It's not going to be reflected in the finances. It's not going to be reflected in how much money the NBA is making and how much money the players are making and the owners are making. What it's going to be reflected in is a continuing state of disillusionment at the current enshittification of everything and how much it's contaminated the one thing that a lot of people are still connecting to try to connect to everybody else. Now, it's at this point in the video where I will mention that I do love sports. Like, I do enjoy watching sports. But my habits have had to change a lot over the past couple of years as I've had to make decisions about what I would be able to ethically support and how much of a drain engaging with these things can be on my life and on my livelihood. I used to spend way too much time paying attention to sports, and I probably still do to a degree, but I've reduced that engagement so much because I have to live a life, right? I have to pay the bills. And I also want to care more about the people around me. And it's hard to feel like you actually care about the people around you and you care about society and social ills, while you're also investing all this time, energy, and money into institutions that are telling you that everything is fine in society and that all these ideologies that are becoming more and more hard to ignore in sports that are related to fascism, whether it be the idea that, might makes right, whether it be the idea of like dominance and success at all costs and meritocracy and profitability, that is all good. It's just like this cognitive dissonance that I haven't been able to completely wrestle from my life, which I think a lot of people experience when it comes to how they engage with their favorite media, right? We talk about K-pop sometimes when it comes to this channel. We talk about other media things. But with sports in particular, I think people sometimes undersell the power that sports have. They undersell or underestimate how much sports impacts people. Because sports at its core is a combination of so many things that humans find fascinating and meaningful. Okay, strategy, it's physical feats, it's communication. It brings people from all over the world together into one space. It connects people through that. And besides all of that, at its core, right, humans are animals. And animals like to play. They like playing games. They like testing their own physical ability. If you give a cat a scratching post, or if you give a cat one of those things that has like the balls in it that they can chase, or if you shine a light on a wall, it's going to try to catch the light. It's going to try to interact with these things. You know, dogs like to chase their own tail, or dogs like to play with balls, and they like to do tug of war. Animals like play, and animals love to be challenged mentally and physically to figure out how to accomplish a task that might seem arbitrary, might seem dumb, but is fundamental to the experience of living. And so sports is this way that we have institutionalized that very desire for each of us. It's something anybody can connect with and relate to on that base level. And then you can build out all of this strategy and all of this culture out of that, right? All this culture out of that. I used to get really annoyed when people like my old political science professor would kind of rant about how much they hated sports. God bless my political science professor from college, but he used to rant about how much people would be wasting their time paying attention to sports, how it's so dumb. It's just a bunch of dudes throwing a ball into a hoop and they make a bazillion dollars and everybody cheers and it distracts people and all of that. I knew at some level that he was right. But I also felt like it was kind of, if not disrespectful, then it was kind of almost anti-intellectual in a sense of like not being curious about why people engage with these things. It lacks empathy for something that, again, I argue is very fundamental to the human experience and something that has the potential to do really cool things. But what I realized later is that somebody like my political science professor, he wasn't just reacting to the idea of sports, okay? He wasn't reacting to the idea of people playing soccer, the idea of gym class. He was reacting to what we have made sports into. It's this reaction to what actually existing sports are. He was rejecting this distraction and the hateful value systems of sports under capitalism. You know, the fetishization of male athleticism as representing the goodness of patriarchy. It's really an energy harvesting ritual, right? The way that it's set up, you have these massive corporations harvesting energy in this ritual in which men are initiated to feel a part of something in an era of total atomization and disillusionment. Instead of engaging with their local neighborhood and feeding the poor or feeling connected to each other, even with their own sports participation, it's investing all this money and time into staring at a screen and jumping up and screaming when your team drops the ball. All a rich man's game that generates profit for the world's biggest exploiters, okay? We talk about sports washing when it comes to the Saudi regime, but this is what sports has been for decades and decades. It's sports washing for the biggest companies that invest into these things as a way to maintain cultural relevance, but also because it's so profitable. And it huddles tens of thousands of human beings into these stadiums that were built over the bodies of migrant laborers so that they could spread airborne illnesses and hurl cheers and insults at multimillionaires that they've tethered their identities to, okay? They've tethered their identities to. This is why I think there is a contradiction here in terms of there's a potential for us to engage with sports in some type of way to help people. And there is a need, I think, to rescue sports from what it has become institutionally. We owe it to each other to develop healthier relationships with sports, ones that aren't completely mediated by money, by capitalism, by enslavement of our time and our brains. And I think what's happening in these games, whether it's this proliferation of sports betting that contaminates absolutely everything and is only just going to cause more and more scandals and more disillusionment, whether it's crises like the Kawhi Leonard aspiration scandal in the NBA, whether it's other crises like, for instance, racism, like an incident which happened recently with Vinicius Jr. and somebody named Gianluca Prestiani in a game between Real Madrid and Benfica, two of the biggest teams in Europe, two of the biggest teams in the world. You have this extremely controversial incident a couple of weeks ago in which an Argentinian player seems to clearly be saying something under his shirt to the black player Vinicius Jr., who was one of the best and richest players in the world. And Vinicius Jr., as well as a couple of other teammates, immediately identify him as saying a racial slur. So you have racial slurs, allegedly, of course, because Prestiani keeps denying it. As a matter of fact, he actually says that he called him some sort of homophobic slur instead. Oh, I wasn't being racist, I was being homophobic. Hilarious, right? Europeans, you gotta love them. But this idea that these are the folks that we're supposed to be looking up to. The amount of institutions and people that rallied behind this Argentinian kid that none of them know personally, that they all have a parasocial relationship with, who is representing a massively rich team, who clearly does not feel very proud about what he's saying, whatever it is, because he's tucking his face under his shirt to say it. And very much most likely because of, the people who were there hearing it was saying a racial slur. But you have Portuguese people that are like, no, it's impossible. We're not racist. Eusebio's black. He was a player on our team who we loved. So therefore we can't be racist. And you have people making false equivalences of Vinicius Jr., making it harder for himself because he dances and because he provokes the crowd. This massive controversy over a type of racism that people keep saying seems so antiquated, right? Like, I'm going to try to pull up a clip from this video. This was the statement, by the way, that Benfica made. It fully supports and believes in the version presented by the player Prestiani. They regret the defamation campaign to which the player has been subjected.
I want to go back to yesterday and what I said. You could see yesterday that I reached a certain lassitude about the topic and how it all went last night. But again, if you think about what the player said, as soon as I saw that Prestiani said what he said, obviously the club gonna back him up. If he denies what happened, the club is going to back him up.
I also want to play Kate Scott, the host here, and her comments about this.
Well, I guess today is a new day in football, but with the same old racist problems. And whilst we do want to focus on the games ahead today, because the game is what we love, yesterday does still linger. And whether or not you like Vinny Jr., that shouldn't shape your opinion on this incident. And which team you support, it shouldn't affect which side of the story that you fall on. This isn't Real Madrid versus Benfica. It is right versus wrong. Vinny Jr. and Kylian Mbappe said that there was repeated racial abuse. Gianluca Prestiani said they misheard. But he covered his mouth to hide what he said from the cameras. And hopefully we can all agree that if what you're saying on a football pitch is shameful enough to have to hide it from the public, then you're wrong. In any case, racial abuse is not new in this game, that's for sure. In decades gone by, Cyril Regis, Howard Gale, Viv Anderson and John Barnes, to name just a few who played in this country, dealt with continued and horrific racial abuse to pave a path for players of Vinny's generation to play and celebrate without shackles. Except in 2026, that still doesn't always apply. They are still expected, as Vinny Jr. was last night, to rise above it, to answer by performance, to shut up and play. Jose Mourinho is an iconic figure in world football. Yesterday, he switched the focus from what had actually been said to whether there was provocation for it. He essentially told us that Vinny Jr. was asking for it. That is a damaging narrative from a man who is considered a leading figure in the global game.
And as I'm looking at this, right, and I'm hearing Kate Scott's comments about it, you can't help but think to yourself, of course this is never going to get addressed, because the material reality is not getting addressed. We have made it normal to say, to hell with a person's views, to hell with a person's character. As long as they can play a sport, it's important that they get all this money and all this support. That there is nothing bigger than winning, but more so than profiting. Even if we are not the ones receiving the profit, even if it's literally an organization of people who are going to do fuck all with the money. That is the most important thing. And people who show up to the stadium are entitled to say whatever they want in the heat of the moment, in the passion of the moment. And there's not going to be any protection for the players on the pitch, whether it's about abuse related to gambling or whether it's racial abuse, good old fashioned. Because the point is that this is a spectacle. The point is that this is a profitable product. And as long as that is satisfied, there's no way we're going to risk it by having some type of integrity, by trying to, shut things down for a while until shit gets figured out, by emboldening specific resources, specific organizations. It's always going to be these very basic campaigns. Say no to racism, right? But the racism is the game. Because the game is ultimately now one of a capitalist race to monetize something that is core to the human experience. And so the human part of it is less and less important. But the human part of it is why we're engaging in the first place. So why would we allow this to happen? Why is it that we allow for something that we fundamentally only care about because of how it relates to the human experience? Why do we allow it to be dehumanized time and time again? You hear a lot of people talk about how the game has changed, whether it's in soccer, whether it's in baseball, the NBA. There's constant complaints about how optimization and financialization and sports science have taken out the soul of the game. And I think that a lot of these complaints are honestly a little bit misleading. Not that there's nothing to it, but this is also something that has happened time and time again. You can go back decades to the 80s or to the early 1900s and see similar complaints about how the soul of the game is being lost. Every time that there's advancements and changes in how the game is played, and every time there is this emphasis on the importance of winning a sport above everything else and the glory behind that, you're going to get these shifts in a sport of sometimes more entertaining, sometimes less entertaining. That kind of thing sorts itself out more naturally. But I think what people are really complaining about, that they might not realize, is the fact that the game isn't human anymore. Not because people are playing a very specific technical style to a specific technical strategy, not because of all the time wasting and the diving and the flopping, but because every 2 seconds, every space on the pitch in which you can see an advertisement, you will see an advertisement. Because of the fact that every time you watch a match, you are seeing athletes who fundamentally do not care about you and will express as much, who will talk about how little they care about what's going on in the world around them, who ally themselves with fascists, ally themselves with billionaires, who keep silent about any social and political issue that affects even people that would be in their own family or people that would be in the neighborhoods they grew up in, because they have multi-million-dollar deals with Adidas and Nike. You have people like LeBron James, who is one of the richest athletes in the world, but who recently at a press conference decided to say that he had heard nothing but great things about Israel, just chumming it up with an Israeli supporter. And this is not the first time that he has made vaguely Zionist comments. But this is the icon. This is the person who is supposed to represent the very soul of the sport. Well, this is the soul. I've heard nothing but great things. Will LeBron James ever talk about Palestinians? The Palestinian fans that he's supposed to be representing? The Arab fans that he's supposed to be representing? I highly doubt it. But this was a massive controversy as well, because it just adds to the stockpile of evidence that the vast majority of male athletes, let's just say it, male athletes, don't give a shit about you. They don't care about other people. They don't care about society. They don't care about people's well-being. And why would they? We have told them over and over again that the only thing that matters is how well that they can compete in this sport so that they can generate more profit for these institutions. And as a matter of fact, speaking up about things happening politically and having integrity is a contradictory force to being a great athlete, to being a great male athlete, to generating a lot of profit for the NBA, to generating a lot of profit for the owner of your team. And so it is vastly discouraged, and you get this media trading cycle in which players on these teams are instructed to speak as little as possible about as much as possible and to restrict their expression of self. And so this is one of many things that I think subconsciously is making people feel distant from the game. Because back in the day, you obviously had always had dumb jocks. Obviously, athletes always represented a vast spectrum of different ideologies and people. But people like Muhammad Ali, who LeBron James has previously said he aspires to be like, or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, they put a significant amount of things on the line to speak out against war, to speak out against racism, to be an activist, to advocate for people. And those are people that we cherish fondly to this day. Someone like Diego Maradona in the 80s actively advocated for the poor people of Latin America, right? He was controversial. He was not perfect at all. None of these people are perfect. But nowadays, you don't even get an attempt. Nowadays, if a player says, damn, crazy what's going on, they get 50,000 likes because people are so hungry to feel like these athletes who they have invested so much in might possibly have a soul. Literally no celebrity really cares. I don't agree. I don't agree that literally no celebrity really cares. And I really don't like it when people say things like that, because we see that certain celebrities do actually put things on the line to advocate for certain causes. And we've talked about this in previous videos, right? There are folks who you could consider celebrities who are artists, entertainers, filmmakers, athletes, who spend a considerable amount of time, if not just making public comments, but advocating people to do specific things. You see somebody like Hozier that I've talked about in the past. Hozier is a big ass artist. He fills up big stadiums, and then he gives people a big speech about how they need to call their local politicians and how they need to rally in the streets to demand for peace in Palestine and the end of genocide and occupation. But I think what speaks the most to my point, and I do actually like that you said that, is the fact that if you contrast these men athletes with women athletes, you see a vast difference. You see a very significant difference. And that brings me finally to Alyssa Liu, who obviously everybody knows what she did in the Olympics. She won gold, but she did so also on her own terms. She did so with a really beautiful skate that was full of joy and enthusiasm. And people have been talking a lot about how great Alyssa Liu is as a skater and how much just her performance of the skate captures something that has been lost in sports. I'll just show this little edit.
Winning isn't all that, and neither is losing. It's just something that happens. It's the outcome. But what matters is the input and the journey. And I would say take a break. I take breaks even now. And I think that's the way to do it.
When you watch Alyssa Liu skate, it's very obvious that what she is doing is quite different from other people. She skates on beat. She skates to music. She dances, which is something that like years ago, I assume figure skaters dance to the music, right? Like that's part of the whole thing. It's graceful, it's artistic. But no, like if you watch the vast majority of figure skating now, people don't have fun or don't look like they're having very much fun. There's not that much artistry in it, which is not a knock on their abilities or even their necessarily their integrity. But it's to say that her doing this was kind of revolutionary in its own right. You know, you see the smiling, you see the little hand gestures, you see how gracefully she's moving. Obviously, there's a lot of skill in this, but what stands out the most is that there is a spirit in it, a spirit that isn't attached to the idea of an outcome, that isn't attached to the idea of this is what we can do if we, do this many spins in the air, but is specifically focused on this is my personality, this is what I love to do, this is how I want to do it. And that had a huge impact on people's psyches. And it's not just her, right? As Kavisha points out, Amber Glenn also dances to the music. And what's also interesting about both of them is that Alyssa Liu and Amber Glenn have also both been politically engaged. I definitely do care about what our country is doing. I think it is really important to notice the faults in our own government, right? This was a pretty pared down statement that she made. But this is also somebody who's been to Palestine rallies and who has posted about ICE. And this is not to say like, oh, Alyssa Liu is the biggest activist of our times, but she indicates that she has an interest in what's going on in the world around her, which I realize you might think is a low bar to clear. But when you have geared up athletes to do anything but that for decades, seeing that in spite of this construct makes a difference. And that's not even to say anything about how vocal Amber Glenn has been. She's been a fierce advocate for LGBTQ plus rights. If woke means people who use their platforms to advocate their marginalized communities in the country that they're actively representing, then yeah, sure. This is something you do not see with male athletes, and it actually matters. And a lot of men are going to act like it doesn't, but it really does. Because you can see it in them. A lot of men who are sports fans, they're miserable. And this is one of the things that's so difficult about this space for me. I love watching sports. I find it so interesting for a variety of reasons. I love following the statistics. I love learning about the mechanics of how to shoot a jump shot off the dribble. I love the whole thing of it, the strategy, the teamwork, the personality that kind of you find injected into it. You know, I grew up a massive Yankees fan. I'm no longer a Yankees fan. I just follow the Yankees. That's what I like to tell people. I follow what's going on, but I am not emotionally invested at all, for a variety of reasons relating to what we're just talking about. I also, I watch a lot of NBA. I watch college basketball. I watch soccer. I know about these things. I'm not speaking about it from a place of being some sort of outsider. I really, really know what I'm talking about in this respect. Believe me when I tell you that men who are sports fans are completely disconnected. What these athletes are talking about was not less than the bare minimum a decade ago. You were not seeing major U.S. athletes advocating for Palestine or showing any support for Palestine. You were not seeing LGBTQ plus activism encouraged by these athletes. And you can say, oh, it's less than the bare minimum. But what does that actually get you? What does that get us here, right? Let's not try to coat everything in the light of how bad everything is and how much worse everything is, because that's the reality you're creating by doing that. That being said, if you follow how men follow sports, you see that despite whatever they tell you, despite the fact that they want to argue so much about how little it matters sometimes, or try to ignore this type of shit so much, it gets to them in ways that they are simply not conscious of. You see how NBA fans talk about the NBA, something speaking to what Manhattan Project is referencing. It's gossip. It's homophobia. It's Jared McCain painting his nails, oh, he's zesty. Dwight Howard, zesty. It's, oh, this guy is a flopper and a foul baiter. This guy is a terrorist. Darwin Hamas, right? This type of stuff is miserable. Being online or sometimes offline in spaces where people are fans of sports, it's a miserable experience because nobody's actually talking about the sports half the time. Nobody's actually talking about the sports half the time. Nobody's going, wow, that was really cool. If as a man you watch a game and something happens and you say, wow, that was awesome, they go, pfft. They go, this fucking guy, cornball, they laugh at you. The whole idea of enjoying the spectacle and enjoying the humanity of the sport, it's belittled, it's demeaned, it's insulted. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that deep down, these men are filled with discomfort and insecurity and frankly hate towards each other and towards the people that they are spending all their time idolizing. Idolizing people like Kobe Bryant, who, even if you don't want to believe the rape case for whatever reason, despite the fact that the evidence is what it is somebody who was renowned to be an asshole. And this applies too to like the way people play sports, right? Kavisha mentions in the chat, I remember boys who were the best at sports being the most arrogant in school and sexist instead of actually trying to engage conversation in sports with anyone else. This is also a canonical experience for I think most men, and a lot of them won't admit it. For me, growing up, I would have loved to play more basketball. I was really bad at it for a variety of reasons. I got hypermobility, I got issues with like my proprioception. There's a lot of things going on there, right? But I enjoyed playing basketball. At least I would have if I had people to play with that were enjoyable to play with. But there's so many times when you play basketball, pick up basketball with people, and the attitude is just terrible. First of all, if you're not part of their clique or their group of people that they want to play with, they treat you like you're not there. But moreover, if you do anything to make people feel like you're not good, they verbally abuse you, they ignore you, they never pass you the ball. The experience is miserable, right? And so for me, something that would have been a really cool way for me to get exercise and socialize with people and just do something that I felt passionate about, despite the fact I'm not great at it, turned into like a miserable part of my ego. I would think a lot about this stuff all the time. It swallowed me whole, to be honest with you. And again, a lot of men have had this experience. And we refer to it in these very kind of casual ways. Oh, the ball hog at the pickup game. And oh, how guys are when they do XYZ. But we never talk about how miserable it is. And this is why I think what's happening in women's sports is interesting. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's perfect. For instance, the sports gambling thing, that's coming to women's sports. It's already been in women's sports. It's not as if women athletes have a record of being like anti-capitalist, though some can be. There's a lot of room for improvement that probably won't happen in a lot of regards. But one thing that I think is central to why women's sports are becoming more and more popular is the fact that people like the women who are playing. People think that they seem like decent people. People think that they, at the very least, don't seem like they are completely detached from what's going on around them. And people get the sense that these women, sometimes non-binary people, enjoy what they're doing. In figure skating, the idea of chasing the score kind of dominated everything for a long time, right? This is a Vox piece called How Figure Skating Rewards Risk Over Artistry. And there's, a lot of talk too about Russian figure skaters who ended up getting banned from this Olympics, I believe. A lot of the love that people have for figure skating, the most beautiful parts of it, are completely sucked out of it, because if ultimately the point of sports is to win and to be the best and to compete at the highest level, and if all this profit is being injected, including at the gambling level now more than ever, based off of those values, then the pressure is on for people to skate purely for executing at some type of scale, for some type of score. And that means pushing people's bodies past the breaking point, as you saw with a lot of young skaters from Russia. That means that a lot of the opportunities for people to connect with the sport that somebody like Alysa Liu highlighted with her performance are thrown out of the window because it's completely exclusionary. You see with the rise of women's basketball that there's a bit more of an open-mindedness towards trying different things out, particularly with the Unrivaled League and how they're doing like one-on-one tournaments and stuff like that. And you have dudes who are in the comments who are like, this is good, we should do this in the NBA. But the NBA fundamentally is antagonistic towards its viewer base, because what matters is not the people watching it, the regular people watching it that have siphoned all this energy toward it to make it what it is. We no longer matter. We mattered very little before, and with each year we matter less and less, because now that they've gotten all this energy from us, and now that we've willingly consented to just giving all this power to that system and to these kinds of people and to this kind of value system, now they can take that and extract as much profit from it as possible, and they know we won't do shit. And so the last thing that I'm going to address is actually related to some of the comments coming up here. Double Crested Cormorant says, the lack of respect for the WNBA versus the NBA is sad, and I don't understand why it's so hated, right? And this is where I really want to offer a critical lens, but also an empathetic one. The reason why men so often hate on women's sports, and there's a lot of men who don't, But the reason why so many men have made cottage industries online, shitting on the WNBA and women's sports, talking about, oh, if this guy would have played in the WNBA, he would score 50 a game. Oh, wow, you're telling me height and athleticism makes a difference? No kidding, right? But the reason that they keep lashing out at women's sports in this way, instead of just letting it exist and not being interested in it, is because women's sports are a threat to the values that prop up men's sports. When you have a growing industry, but more so a growing culture of people who play sports and are really good at it and love it and also care about regular people and are obligated to care about regular people and who experience this kind of marginalization that allows them to have that lens to care about regular everyday issues. And when you have these people who aren't literally the most fast twitch athletic people in the world who are still like, yeah, but we want to play sports, that is a complete affront to the value system of men's sports. Because the whole point of why they do all this, why men take all this disrespect, they take all this abuse from other men, they spend all their time arguing online, miserable, over athletes who wouldn't give a fuck about them if they saved them while they were on fire, is because it reinforces for them what is most important, which is that powerful people are powerful. And that power is based in their ability to physically dominate somebody else. And the idea that as long as you can do that, as long as you can assert that dominance over somebody else, it doesn't matter who you are as a person. It doesn't matter if you're a racist. It doesn't matter if you're a fascist. It doesn't matter if you're racist. Can you participate in physically dominating somebody else? And what that is it's not just ignorance, it's fear. What these men are saying when they shit on women's sports because the women are not as fast or as muscular or as tall as the men are and therefore can't do certain things that the men can do. The reason why they shit on it is because they need to assert something to make them feel less fear. It's because they risk something by aligning themselves with people that could be seen as weaker. They risk being seen as weaker themselves. And it's because if those supposedly weaker people do build something more powerful, then what does that say about them who are in these positions of weakness and have just surrendered to them? If I spent my whole life as some 6'1", 160 pounds soaking wet Asian kid talking about fuck y'all, man, Kobe's the GOAT, and arguing people online about LeBron versus Kobe for 3 hours and shitting on players and betting on sports and arguing, I can do that and it helps me escape the fact that I was never part of that club. It helps me feel like I have admission into a club that I don't actually have admission into. Like I actually can participate in the very power systems that actually make my life worse. And that misery and lack of power and lack of friendship and lack of solidarity and lack of care is actually the most important thing. It's actually the standard. And there was never another option. What women's sports tells people is not women are inherently better than men because of their biological whatever. It doesn't say if any time women do things, it's better, or women are simply more woke than men, because there's plenty of women that uphold the patriarchy too, right? What it says is things can be different. And no matter how you feel about this conversation, you have to admit that women's sports are in certain ways different from men's sports. That women athletes do, by and large, behave differently than men athletes. And they prop up different values. And that gives us a radar into what could be if we didn't submit to this system. If we didn't surrender our energy to this. If we decided, you know what, I'm pirating instead of watching on the network. Or if we said, you know what, I'm just going to catch the highlights. Or you know what, I'm just going to miss most of these games. Or you know what, I'm going to talk to my sports fan friends and we can talk about the game, Jalen Brunson and shit. And I'm also going to ask him how he's doing, and how his sister's doing. And we're also going to talk about things that are meaningful to us. That is the life that I have begun to build for myself with sports. It's not one that's completely free from capitalism. It's not one where I only consume things ethically. It's not one where I'm better than anybody else. But it's one where I can align with my ethics more. But more importantly, I can connect to the very thing that I actually care about, that actually matters to me, which is how cool it is to see people try their best at something. How cool it is to see what humans can do with their bodies or can't do with their bodies. How cool strategy is. But most importantly, how I can connect with other people based on it. These conversations are always weighed down by people who ultimately want to lack empathy. They want to shut their empathetic part of their brain off and shit on men back because men have been shitting on them. Because these dumb jocks have been shitting on them. But we can't ever release We can't completely surrender the possibility for connection that exists in sports. And through sports, we see these last vestiges of this dying world that we live in, wherein more and more people are succumbing to disease, where nobody can get healthcare, nobody can get housing, nobody can eat. Sports is continuing by the skin of its teeth to grab onto us and tell us the old world still exists. Solidarity still doesn't matter. Money still is king, and you will just like it. You will live with it and you will like it. But ultimately, that too will die. Ultimately, the things that Alysa Liu does in an ice skating rink tell us a lot more about what we can do to connect with each other and what we can do with sport and what sport means in the first place than any of this other shit that they're injecting us with. And so I ask you to lead with empathy and hope, not just feel bad for people who are bad people. You can do that to whatever degree you wish, but see these contradictions as a way in which you can actually connect with other people. Be curious, because I bet, whether or not this video gets views or whatever, that a lot of men really need to hear stuff like this. They really want to talk about these things, and they've never felt empowered to do so, because men's sports and the value systems of it and the capital in it have made them feel as if those things are not worthwhile. And that has to change, and it can change.